sharing with about another missile that was launched back in 1967.
Okay, please do. Please continue.
Yes, and in 1970, another missile was launched, an Athena rocket was launched out of Utah, and this particular rocket carried nuclear material, which veered off course and landed right into the area known as the Zone of Silence. So there was a lot of international scrutiny because this missile crashed into the desert, and U.S. authorities had to go in and clean up the contamination site. So it got a lot of publicity. But here, I'm very sure you're probably familiar with moon dust and blue fly.
Yes, and these were the operations to go out and recover space vehicles that may have fallen in, possibly from the Soviet Union or Communist China or whomever might be launching these space vehicles.
And the fact that it's U.S. assets that are falling into other countries and then setting up the whole operation of retrieval, and then in between that, when you come into having UFO crashes, of course, that is a convenient way of saying that's one of ours.
Yes.
And so this was the trend, or this is something as we started doing in our research. And the thing that makes this also a very interesting case, John, is the fact that a Mexican retrieval team was also involved in recovering the airplane. But it wasn't until the next day in the morning that a Mexican patrol plane had spotted wreckage on the floor. They found the plane, but then they discovered the disc. Now, throughout this period of time, everything was being under heavy surveillance by the U.S. spy satellites as well as reconnaissance aircraft. And the Mexican soldiers came across the disc, and they found they found the plane, parts of the wreckage of the plane, but the disc, as described in the Deneb report, was approximately 16 feet in diameter and 16 feet 5 inches in diameter, and it had no windows or doors. It was 5 feet tall and convex, and it had two slightly damaged areas at both ends, but at each end. One was a 12-inch jagged hole. The other was at least 24 inches. So this is really extraordinary detail that this report's providing us.
Now, chronologically, so I have this right, the Mexican troops arrived how long after this crash?
The crash happened around 10:35 approximately in the evening. And then it wasn't until the next morning that the actual operation was conducted. I need to give you back. I could tell you precisely. It was around almost 10:07 was when they detected the object, and it entered Mexican airspace around 10:10 in the evening. 10:25 it was approximately that it had collided with this object.
Wow! And now the I just want to make sure I have the story right. So the commercial plane, different obviously than this other crash, happening at the same time. I mean, is that kind of part of the story that that was the collision?
Yeah, the collision was with the small plane going south toward El Paso, and then this object was traveling north, and they both collided at the same intersect.
Great. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I clarified that. Okay, so then did they just launch a recovery operation?
Right. Next morning. The thing about that area, John, since being there, it's very remote, and it's very, very rugged. So they really do any sort of operation. I mean, they had to wait, obviously, the next day to go out and start searching for the airplane. Well, they spotted the airplane, and then around approximately 10:35 in the morning, they found a disc intact. There was no mention as to whether or not that the disc had any sort of occupants, but we can get into that in a moment there. So what happened was, as the Mexican soldiers then discovered the disc, then they started to go ahead and to load it on their trucks, in their convoy. Basically, they had a convoy out there. At that time, there was a U.S. team that was all ready to be launched out of Fort Bliss, basically through the CIA. There was an arsenal of 3 Huey helicopters and a massive Sea Stallion.
Wow.
So then, again, the spy satellites were starting to follow the truck convoy, and then all of a sudden it stopped.
Wow. Well, hold on, Ruben. We've got to take a break. We're already at the bottom of the hour. More with Ruben Uriarte right here on BVRN. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Black Vault Radio. We're talking about Mexico's Roswell with Ruben Uriarte, a fascinating case. Now we've got a possible collision between a commercial aircraft and a possible UFO. The Mexican military's out there. The United States military is en route. Ruben, I wanted to ask you, though, is this a cooperative operation, or is it not?
No, in this particular case, it was not. In our other research that we've done of other crashes, we're finding that there is a cooperative effort.
Mm-hmm.
And we can definitely get into that in the other crashes, crash research that we're doing. With this one, what happened, John, was that the Mexican truck convoy had to stop in its tracks, and all of a sudden, as these reconnaissance satellites were basically picking up interphotos bodies on the ground. And so this was all of a sudden caused a major alarm. And they found all these soldiers that were just completely were not moving, and so the assumption was that something extraordinary happened there. So they launched these helicopters out of Fort Bliss, and they entered into Mexican airspace over a little area known as Candelaria. It's it's real close to Presidio. And what they did was they came in, they were prepared, they wore biohazard outfits,
mm-hmm.
the suits, and they went through they went immediately to the particular location. The giant Sea Stallion arrived, and what they did was they were able to hitch the UFO back on the Sea Stallion. They took it away. But one of the things that they did was they removed the soldiers and the vehicles, and then they destroyed them. They basically exploded everything. And our particular thoughts were, well, what was the reason for that? What we were thinking is perhaps they were trying to stop some sort of biological agent, or what we call the version of Mexico's Andromeda strain. They were obviously concerned, and they went ahead and they used some sort of high explosive to evaporate that area, or there's a word I'm looking for that comes sterilize. And one of the reasons why we think that happened was the fact that they took that disc back across the border, and in the report it said that they took that report later to Atlanta. Well, what's in Atlanta?
What is in Atlanta?
Yeah. It's a big agency. It's a worldwide agency that's headquartered in Atlanta. It's the Center of Disease Control.
Wow, CDC.
And
okay.
so with that, we began looking at the Center of Disease Control. They have, and they're very equipped with these huge biosafety labs. They have different various levels, of course, and the fact that they monitor very deadly diseases and organisms throughout the world, and the fact that it's in that report. That's our speculation, but
mm-hmm.
it makes sense.
No, it absolutely does make sense.
So, so that's really is the overall part of the story there about the what had happened and with that event there, John. And so now, what we're going back is tracing back the events. Now, the other part of it, as you know, is when you put out or some research. This is going back to the Roswell. There you had, as more evidence was being gathered and more people were being involved, finally there were some very key witnesses who actually saw the craft, as you know, or saw the bodies and that. What we're trying to do is similar, where we're putting this information out there, trying to network with a number of other witnesses. There was one gentleman who told us that he recalls back in 1974, way out there in the boonies, but he's lived there since when he was a young man. He remembered hearing a very